Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
I'm great. I just
Good.
finished listening to what the message I just sent out to everybody. I just finished listening to Adam Hamilton on March
Oh,
15th, talking
on
about
the,
living unafraid in the pandemic.
all right. Thanks for the link.
So I'm getting ready to start some music here, and I'll just play with the music on and the Bible study for 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, sounds good.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Rick. Happy Sunday.
Thank you.
How's work going?
It's going good.
Are you out at the office or still home?
No, I'm working every other day. They split the office in half, so it's only half full. So we work every other day from the
Okay.
office and every other day from home.
Okay, that works well. Morning, Lee.
Morning, Scott.
Good morning. Hi.
Morning, Lee.
Morning. How you doing, Jim?
Fine, thank you. And you?
I'm hanging in there.
All right. I think I'll go get some coffee.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Okay, might as well have it.
Okay. Want to go out?
Can you hear me?
We hear you.
Oh, the host.
Hi, Linda.
So hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for those who joined us early. We were listening to a CD I have from Miriam entitled Hymns Pure and Simple. I bought it some time ago, and I've had it sitting here waiting to play it. Finally got a chance to play it yesterday when I was thinking about what music to play, and thought that would be a great quiet time before we started our Bible study. And then I'll probably play one more song at the end, and then I've got a couple other songs. We had YouTube decided that my uploading of Josh Groban off of YouTube and also Reba McEntire off of YouTube was potentially a copyright infringement, so they blocked those two adult Bible studies from showing on YouTube, the 24th and the 31st. I managed to get the 31st reversed by deleting that Reba McEntire YouTube, and it was posted. So that was the delay. I don't know what's happened with the 24th. I've got to go back and find out what happened, because I do want that posted as well. In the meantime, I'd made everything private so that I could keep them, but not have them go back and try to block more of it. Once I can figure out how all this is going on, I'll unblock. Those are the only two times that I've uploaded what I would call, current modern professional music. So I don't see any problem playing them for us, but when I go to publish the Bible studies from now on, I will delete any of those kind of that kind of music and just provide the reference to it, where to find it on YouTube. You can get it yourself. I don't need to be, I guess, showing their music. So anyway, that's where we stand. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you're here. Everybody's on mute right now, so if you want to talk, you just have to unmute yourself. I'm getting ready to go to our next topic to start our Bible study. This is a special week. If you remember from our schedule, this is our week to talk about what if Judas had waited, and it actually required a couple hours yesterday to put together a program, because I can't just use everything that's already set, because there was no guide for this. There was no other information other than what I pulled out of the different books and other materials. So hopefully this will work out okay. In any case, with all you participating, it's got to work out fine. So welcome again, everybody. I'm going to go to the start of the scripture reading that I want to start with. And I've actually typed these up, so if you find a typo, I'm sorry about that, but I tried to check everything. And instead of having you try to find it in your Bible, I'm providing you the material on the screen. Does everybody see that okay? Okay, good. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." When they finished eating, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Simon replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." Jesus asked a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Simon replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus said to him, "Take care of my sheep." And he asked a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was sad that Jesus had asked him a third time, "Do you love me?" He replied, "Lord, You know everything. You know I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. So we had that last week. We talked about it last week. I just thought it was good bringing it back up as an introduction to what we're going to talk about today. I'd like to hear people's thoughts on this. We had a little bit of discussion last week, but let's go ahead and talk about it this morning again. Perhaps maybe a little more depth than we got to last week. So what is this passage telling each of you? Anybody want to share your thoughts on this passage from John? You'll need to unmute yourself if you want to talk. We will. It's coming. No one wants to talk? Okay, well.
Just a minute, I couldn't unmute. I could always have something to say.
I always count on you for something to say.
So again, to me, this is just a wonderful passage to try to help get the movement restarted, so to speak, at least from John's point of view in John's gospel. Because if you remember, what are they doing? They're fishing, right? They're not out there evangelizing. They're not out there helping people in any way. They're fishing. So this is a way for Jesus, a couple of things. Number one, to let Peter know that everything is okay between he and Jesus. And then number two is that there is a mission, and that is to go and take care and feed the sheep. That is the people of the world. So, and this also, I think, establishes Peter as the one who would be the head of the church for doing that. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, anybody other thoughts?
I just thought of the fact that Peter was a fisherman, and Jesus is talking about feeding sheep. And I think maybe it was a way of getting a radical change of focus, pointing out to him something different that he needed to be besides a fisherman.
Good thought. What about the 3 times? We talked a little bit about that last week. Why 3 times? Why did he ask 3 times?
He was proving his point. He wanted to reinforce it and reinforce it and reinforce it, that Peter was to be the head of the church. Except there wasn't a church at that point.
What you said last week was that he 3 times was because that was how many times Peter denied him.
Right, exactly. That's what at least that's what the text told us was the reason. Maybe Peter. We know Peter is the one who always comes up with the ideas. Engage mouth before thinking. So perhaps this was really to drive it in. In addition to making sure he knew that because he denied him 3 times, he told him 3 times he'd forgiven him. But he also was trying to get it through our quick talker Peter to get him to really realize this is really what he meant. And the idea of sheep and lambs is again talking about being shepherds to the flock. And we're talking about obviously people, not just sheep. The sheep might listen, but and follow the shepherd, but we really want them to work with people, right? Okay, I'd like you to join me in a prayer. And you can mute yourself, leave yourself muted, or you can unmute however you wish to do it. Lord, I have failed you many
times.
Forgive
me. Wash
me
me
and make me new. I do love you.
love you.
Help me to love you more.
Use my
hands. Use my lips. Use my time and my energy.
Use
All of me
to feed your
feed
sheep.
your sheep.
Make
Make
the
the
person
person
you want me to be in
be.
your holy name.
Your holy name.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. And that came right out of our book on page 126. Okay, the next readings I didn't print out, but they're referenced in the book, and I will grab my Bible. I'm looking at Matthew 26, verses 14 to 16. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. And him, obviously, he's talking about Jesus. Okay, before we're going to read about 4 or 5 pieces out of Matthew, but I want to talk about each one as we go. So in this passage, Judas has gone to the chief priests and is basically offering up Jesus and offering up to betray him. So I'd like anybody's thoughts on why is Judas doing this?
One thing that Adam Hamilton brought out that I thought was a little interesting was when Jesus washed the disciples' feet during the Last Supper, and Adam makes the comment, perhaps Judas saw this as being weakness. I hadn't thought of that.
Okay, that's a good thought. I think this took place before the Last Supper. It's before that in Matthew.
Right.
And it the timing, we believe, because at the Last Supper, we're going to talk about that passage in a minute. Judas calls out, or Jesus calls out Judas. And we're going to read that passage next.
It indicated to me that Jesus was not the savior that Judas was looking for.
And I agree with Jen.
Yeah, if he was seeing Jesus as a weakling, not standing up to the Romans, maybe not even standing up much to those that were deriding him, he was disappointed.
Mm-hmm. I also think, too, that maybe Jesus and Judas were better friends than we think they were. And that maybe as a friend, Judas was probably thinking about getting him in prison through the Passover, and then they could go back to Galilee.
Okay. I think it's also been suggested that even though Judas was the money keeper, and 30 pieces of silver would have been nice sum to have to add to the treasury. I don't know that he knew that Jesus was actually going to be crucified for this.
No.
Right.
I think that would have been very unusual. It took a very unusual punishment and convincing authorities to do that. He was thinking of what the priests can do, which is basically, tell Jesus to go away, throw him out of their synagogue, and just tell him we don't want to hear you anymore. And maybe that would give Jesus some more fortitude to to stand up and be the knight on the steed, as opposed to the savior who comes in on the donkey, even though that was the the approach that David had used and subsequent kings since then. So he was looking for Jesus to fulfill the role of Messiah that the Jews all thought of as the Messiah.
A question, well, two questions I have. First of all, are there other things in the Gospels leading up to this that show that Judas is concerned about where things are going or how things are playing out? That's my first question. My second question, not having any idea how much this is going back to Jesus Christ Superstar, I have never researched how much in that really matches what's in the Bible. But very early in that, Judas is expressing very much concern, saying, you know, when this started out, I thought I knew where we're going, and it's all getting out of control. This is getting out of hand. Is there anything in the Bible where Judas expresses earlier than these passages some hesitation or disillusionment or concern about?
Well, you remember that Judas was the one that spoke up when the oil was being wasted on
Yes.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That's the one that sticks in my mind. We could do a lot with the money. Let me sell this oil and we'll have more money for the treasury so we can feed more people, or we can keep it for ourselves so we can eat. He was that was the one passage I remember. Does anybody remember another one? Michael, do you have another thought?
Well, I was in the Gospel of John when they were going to Jerusalem. One of the disciples makes a statement about that there's could only be trouble going there. But I wanted to get to Barbara's question about Jesus Christ Superstar, because it's there, I think, that Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber, I think they kind of do some reading between the lines, which I think is fine, because to me, that portrays I think the humanity of both Jesus and Judas and the stuff that was going on as they were going to, go to Jerusalem and be in Jerusalem. If you remember my Palm Sunday sermon, I was lifting up some from Borg Crossan about, remember, as one side, the pilgrims are coming in the east, and then the west is Pilate and the Roman legions. So it's a prime time, and this is something that just didn't happen when Jesus was coming into Jerusalem, but it was a time when it happened every time. I'm sure that even before Pilate was assigned there, just because I think the Romans knew that there could be trouble with a rabble-rousing Jewish person. But getting back again, I think that with probably Judas initially thinks and signs on with Jesus because he thinks Jesus is the one to take care of the Romans. But when it looks like it's not going to be that way, then there has to be another way to get out of Jerusalem alive.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this? We'll move on to the next passage that I've picked out. And by the way, I gave everybody a homework assignment, so I'm going to read out of Matthew, but if you manage to find other passages that discuss Judas at the appropriate time as we go through this discussion, please bring those forward, and we'll either you can read them or you can let me know what it is and I'll read them. But I particularly picked out the Matthew to keep the context flowing together with that. Okay, so the next one is 26:20 to 25. And I'll go ahead and read that as well. When evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. And while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." They were very sad and began to say to him one after the other, "Surely, Lord, you don't mean me." Jesus replied, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." Then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi." And Jesus answered, "You have said so." Now, this happens to be the NIV translation. There's different translations that have that statement by Jesus with different words, but basically the thought's the same. So, what's anybody's take from this passage? Even though everybody said no, it won't be me. We already know that a little bit later, Jesus is going to predict Peter's denial. And I wasn't going to read that this time. We read that last time, but here's Judas being called out. We don't hear much more about this. I mean, it just says, "Oh well, you're the one that's going to betray me," and they move on. The next thing they say, they after they did the Last Supper piece, then they went off and sang a hymn and went to the Mount of Olives. I mean, it's like, yeah, you're going to betray me, but that's expected, no problem. So we'll move on.
Doesn't it say in one of the Gospels, doesn't he speak to Judas and say, "Go and do what you have to do"? It's not maybe in Matthew, but I remember reading it one of them.
Okay, well, anybody want to look while we're looking?
You're right, Jen.
That was why there was a homework assignment. So you want to find it?
It's interesting, nobody else speaks up. Nobody else questions or.
I know that's what I was sort of taken back by. At least not here. It doesn't say anything about what happened. I mean, I could imagine if you were in a group of your 12 closest friends, and someone said, I really don't like what you've been doing. I'm going to betray you and turn you over to the authorities, and was called out. Wouldn't you think somebody else would have said something?
Well, yes, except if one person doesn't speak up right away, then that kind of sets the tone that nobody's going to say anything.
Isn't this when Peter had motioned across or spoken across to John, and John leaned back and asked Jesus, "Who is it?" Isn't this, that's what I remember here. And I remember what Jennifer said, and that's after Jesus dipped his bread into the bowl and gave it to Judas or something. That's when he told Judas to go do what he was going to do. And Judas got up and left. And one of the scriptures states that the rest of the people thought that he was just going off to do a task that Jesus had sent him to do.
Yeah, in the Gospel of John, the 13th chapter, verse 26, Jesus answered, "I will dip this piece of bread in the sauce and give it to the one I'm talking about." Then Jesus dipped the bread, gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. And right then, Satan took control of Judas. Jesus said, "Judas, go quickly and do what you have to do." And no one at the meal understood what Jesus meant. So that's in the Gospel of John, the 13th chapter.
Okay, good. Excuse me.
Was Judas the son of Simon Iscariot? I mean, was Jesus the son of Peter? Was Judas the son of Peter?
No, Simon was a very popular name in those days. So Judas is the son of Simon Iscariot, not Simon Peter.
Okay, different Simon.
Yeah, different Simon.
Different Simon.
Well, and wasn't Simon Iscariot one of the disciples as well? Well, there were two Simons.
I
right?
thought so.
Yeah, there.
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
Go back to the listing of the disciples. At some point, I remember there was a list of them all 12. It's in at least 2 Gospels.
Yeah, in the listing, he had 2 Judas, two men named Judas.
Yeah, 2 men,
Right.
people named Judas, and there was 2 people
Yeah.
named Simon, I thought, as well.
I thought there were 2 Johns.
Yeah.
I don't remember what. I'm assuming it's in John. Again, that's probably in John, and that's where he says Jesus went up to the mountain and called the 12, who he determined were going to be with him, and they list them all.
Okay.
And it's shortly. It's right around the time of the Sermon on the Mount.
Right.
But again, if they didn't know why, if they weren't sure why he was sending Judas, or they did not want to question, nobody wanted to be the first one. You know, it's hard to know what was really going on, but there's often reason people don't speak out, even if they may have a thought or a suspicion. And then, of course, when when one person doesn't speak up, then nobody else does, and then things just flow without anything.
We're going to talk a lot about that coming up in Unafraid.
Well, there was a way back in the 1960s, Kitty Genovese was stabbed to death outside of her apartment, and nobody came to her aid. And so some research was done by psychologists on that. And yeah, for some reason, people will not step forward when there's something going on. And this could very
Not only did nobody come to her aid, nobody called the police.
Right, nobody called the police, right.
If one person is brave enough to speak up, then often many other people will follow. But it takes that one person who is willing to take that step. And if that person doesn't, then the moment is lost, and nobody does it.
That was part of Adam Hamilton's sermon last Sunday when he said that you have to be willing to be that one person, or else you won't make any difference.
Well, in this case, in the case of George Floyd, the woman who was doing the videotaping, the famous videotape, actually said, he's calling out for help. You're hurting him. Get off him. But the policeman didn't say anything, and the one policeman obviously ignored the person doing the videotaping. But we'll talk a lot more about that in our Unafraid series. I did send out both the sermon from last week, the Pentecost sermon from last week from Adam Hamilton, which is, if you haven't had a chance to watch it, I'd really suggest you watch it. And I also sent out one today, just a few minutes ago, right before we started, on the coronavirus. So living unafraid in the face of a pandemic. And I just thought both those were very powerful. In fact, when we do Unafraid, I'm going to make sure everyone has the links to all of his sermons on the Unafraid topic, in addition to the book, because it's very very powerful. I haven't found it. I know there's 2 listings of disciples. I just can't find it right now, and I don't want to take the time. But that'll be a homework assignment, everyone.
One of them, Scott, is in Matthew chapter 10, where they list the 12 disciples. Matthew 10, right at the beginning. And it does mention Simon the Canaanite, or I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, verse number 4. And there are 2 Johns. We have John, the beloved disciple, and we have John, the brother of James, the sons of Zebedee.
Yeah, so we have this, my translation says Simon the Zealot and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. And they're together in one thing. So I believe that we can check some further, but I believe that Simon the Zealot is Judas's father. So anyway, the next passage that I want to go to is Matthew 27. And it's 3 to 5. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. I have sinned, he said, for I have betrayed innocent blood. What is that to us? They replied. That's your responsibility. So Jesus threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. And this then goes on to have the priests decide they're going to use that money. They can't keep the money, so they're going to use it to buy the parcel of land, which is known as the Potter's Field. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this passage. I have to have you do that while I change the CD.
This passage is the reason I believe that Judas was simply, he loved Jesus, and he was just simply trying to push and make things happen and push Jesus into going into public ministry sooner than he wanted to. Because said he was filled with remorse. So I think he was simply trying to push Jesus to do something more sooner than he was intending to do.
Well, I think this goes back also to what either Michael or Jen said earlier, that he didn't think the outcome would go to what it did. He had never anticipated that what he did would lead to Jesus' death.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So there's some things I want you to be thinking about as I try to get this DVD to open up. I want you to think about the timing. He hanged him. So according to the schedule, he hung himself before the trial, before the trial with Pilate, before he knew what was going to happen. He knew that the timing's not exactly clear, but we believe, according to everything I'm reading, we believe in it happened, early Friday morning. Not after the.
Well, it would kind of seem that Judas was at Caiaphas's house. If he had led the people to pick Jesus up and take him back, he would have been at Caiaphas's house as well,
Right.
and saw what was going on and saw what was going to happen. And
Right.
as soon as they said that he deserved death, then he understood.
Right. Well, that may have been what put him over the edge. Okay. So let's think about what would happen if Jesus had not killed himself. What would Christ have done? What would Judas have done? And now we're going to listen to about a 5-minute segment from Adam, which came out of 24 Hours That Changed the World, and it's a supplement section which we didn't play when we did that on purpose.
Well, I'm standing in a place I've never been to on my previous trips to Israel, and that is the edge of hell. Well, not literally, but this is Gehenna. And Gehenna is the place where in Jesus' day, the garbage was brought from the city of Jerusalem, and it was burned constantly. There were constant burning fires. And interestingly enough, here behind me, you can still see garbage piles, and just up the way here, there's garbage that's being burned at this time. Now, the reason why this had become the city dump in Jesus' day was because centuries before, during the time of Ahaz and Manasseh, these kings who had turned away from God sacrificed children to the god Moloch in this place. And it was considered such an abomination to God that it was cleansed. And after it was cleansed of their idolatry, this place became a garbage dump as a way of saying never again. And that's what we think of, this offering of children to the god Moloch. Now, as the fires were burning constantly with garbage, Gehenna came to be associated with hell. Hell being a place where the garbage is burned up, where things are purified and the garbage is burned away, and where only that which is not worth saving is sent. And so we have Gehenna. Now, the reason why we're standing here today is that Gehenna is also the place, or at least this ridge on Gehenna is also the place where we remember Judas, who came to hang himself after he had betrayed Jesus. The 30 pieces of silver that he had sold Jesus out for were used to purchase this field. It's called the Potter's Field, or the Field of Blood. And as it was purchased, it was used then for the burial of common people, folks who had no resources and often had no name. Judas was buried here. Now, behind me, you'll see the ruins of a church that was first built by the Byzantine, in the Byzantine era, and then later rebuilt during the time of the Crusaders to mark the spot where Judas had spent his last hours, and to remember the events that occurred when he betrayed Jesus. Now, you'll see here the graves of some who were buried, who knows, during the time of Judas, maybe the century afterwards, but you see a whole host of old graves back in the back, little caverns where the people were buried. And here you find a tree. It's called a Judas tree, and it reminds us that Judas came to this place after he'd betrayed the Lord. He felt such great remorse that he came to this place and he hung himself. Now, as we think about Judas, I simply want to ponder this idea. Judas, who had been the money keeper for the ministry, for the disciples, we're told that he had helped himself to the funds. He had followed Jesus. He had been with the disciples. He'd done all the things that the disciples had done, and yet somehow there were mixed motives for Judas. He struggled with his desire for wealth. In fact, that's what led him in part to go to the high priest's house. He said, "How much will you pay me in order to betray Jesus?" And so he's struggling both with this desire for wealth, but also with his frustration with Jesus, who he thought was going to raise up the sword and an army to overthrow the Romans. He's frustrated with Jesus. He desires wealth. He's heard everything that Jesus has had to say. He's followed Jesus for 3 years. And yet in the end, he betrays him. Now, after the betrayal, what we know is that he was filled with great remorse, filled with such tremendous remorse that he came to this place and he took his own life. But part of me has to wonder, with such remorse in his heart, what would have happened if he had just waited 3 days? If he had just waited 3 days to when he could see Christ raised from the dead, if he had just come to Jesus and fallen at Jesus' feet and said, "Lord, please have mercy on me," what do you think Jesus would have said? What would he have done? Would Jesus not have shown mercy to Judas, even Judas Iscariot? And you know the answer, of course he would have. If Judas had just waited 3 days, there is no sin that's so great that Jesus can't and won't forgive us and show us mercy. And can you imagine the testimony that Judas would have had from that time forward, having seen the risen Christ, understanding the nature of his kingdom, if he had just been patient, just 3 days, and receiving the mercy of the Lord? Can you imagine the kind of preacher Judas would have been? traveling across the Roman Empire and being able to tell the story of how he'd turned his back on Jesus, how he had betrayed the Lord and sold him out for 30 pieces of silver, and yet Jesus had forgiven him, even him. And here's the question I have for you. If Jesus would have forgiven Judas, can he not forgive you?
Okay, so let's talk about the questions that were posed. Both the ones I posed came right out of having listened to the video. I wanted to change the order of what we've been doing so we had a chance to talk before we heard Adam's video. So now we got a chance to talk about this. Anybody have thoughts on Jesus's forgiveness of Judas? David, you're showing you're trying to say something. Are you?
Yeah. Well, it's. I wasn't going the same direction you were.
Oh well, go whatever direction you want to go.
Real bummer.
Go ahead.
No, well, I mean, it's a real bummer, and then you can try to ascribe the ideas that Judas is going to either change his position or whatever. But I think in stories and, you know, biblical as well, is that you kind of have to have a bad guy, and that fell upon Judas, and that's just kind of where it is.
So he's the antagonist.
Yeah. So
you got the protagonist and you got the antagonist. So he's the antagonist. Is that what you're saying? If we're
Right.
writing a novel, he would continue to be the bad guy even if he lived.
I suspect, although there are novels with redemption in them as well. So.
I think one of
The other question is, what would have happened if Judas wouldn't have betrayed him? Would they just have gone to Jerusalem and then things would have gone on? I mean, that would have changed history as much as his betrayal did.
Yeah, but do you think that that was the way it was going to end up? Jesus has been predicting his death on the cross for some time. He knew that the chief priests were going to get to him. He did everything he could that week to provoke them. He overturned the money changers. He got rid of the people selling stuff. He basically called them, you know, terrible names. He yelled and screamed at them. The priests were going to figure out some way. They just happened to have Judas help him out. But I got to feel that this would have happened in any case.
Well,
I
and
would
if
tend to
Judas had a
agree.
death wish, he could have turned himself in as a possibility as well. You know, so.
Well, and if you look at if Judas didn't do it, and like you say, the other things at hand, other people of the crowd or whatever, but that there is a totally different message if it's someone from his inner circle who does it, as opposed to it just happening as a matter of course by rousing up the crowds or whatever to turn against him. So it changes the whole dynamic when it's somebody that was that close to him that was the ultimate betrayer.
And I wonder if Judas didn't fear for his own life after he thought about the outcome and what he had done. Maybe he decided to kill himself rather than be killed.
Well, and has anybody read the Gospel of Judas? I haven't, and I just wondered if there were points or keys there from the forbidden literature.
In the forbidden literature, the Gospel according to Judas, there is a conversation between Jesus and Judas because Judas does not want to betray him. But Jesus says, and I don't know what the exact words, but basically Jesus says to Judas, you must do this to fulfill righteousness. Something like what Jesus says to John at the his baptism. So, and that is I think either a 2nd or 3rd century writing that was recently discovered within the last 10 years or so. But it's
Yeah,
pretty clear, I think, that some Christian community wanted to somehow rehabilitate Judas.
I was just looking up in my book, Lost Books of the Bible. I don't have it. It's a little bit older. It doesn't have Judas called out. In fact, the index of this is very difficult to decipher.
Well,
So-
I don't. Yeah, it wouldn't be in that book. It's more recent than that.
And I think, if it were 3rd century, whatever, and the Christian group itself was searching for, putting it all together, that if it had to happen, and Jesus is saying it has to happen, okay, why take it out all on Judas? And if we're talking that Jesus would be able to forgive him, just as our earlier comments, then the earlier church and that gospel is setting a better example for us than the path we've chosen, perhaps.
Yeah. Remember, we have chosen the orthodox path. The book that I'm referring to about the Gospel of Judas, I read was from Bart Ehrman.
Okay, so
Well,
I just
see what I can find. I think I'd be interested in knowing, just kind of the attitude and thinking of it in that perspective, that the early church, it's not written at the time, much at the time of the crucifixion, essentially, or shortly thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
It's as people were deciding where the church is going to go, what it is that they believed, and how they were making sense of the world. It'd just be interesting to see.
Well, so here's a bunch of different potential examples of the Gospel of Judas that's up on the screen now.
Mm-hmm.
So that we can do a little more research. I'm sure there'll be something you could get and read.
Well,
based on what David said, when we go back to the earlier reading where a number of the disciples were saying, when Jesus was talking about betrayal, and some said, "Is it me? Is it me?" That could be taken two ways of people saying, "Well, you don't think it's me," or it could be, "Am I the one that's being chosen?" Because if it's been ordained and this has to happen, maybe many of them were wondering, is it going to be me that's going to be asked to do this?
Yeah.
And
Did
so-
I draw the short straw?
Right. So the questioning that they're asking could be looked at in a totally different light than we tend to take it, and people saying, "Oh, surely you don't think it could be me."
yeah.
That's a good thought. Yeah. As with a lot of the Bible passages, there's a lot of things that aren't written down, and it's too bad we didn't have our video cameras going at the time to have more of this recorded. It would have been very interesting, and a lot more books written. Of course,
We
people
needed the
write-
sequel, the Bible, part 2 or 3, or
the Gospels according to Barb. And partly because of the way the Bible is written, there's been more than one book written about the Bible after the Bible. So I guess it gives plenty of people a chance to talk about their interpretations.
Well, remember that the English Bibles that we use today, those are interpretations of the Greek and Hebrew.
Right.
John Calvin is the one who suggested that every Christian should learn Greek and Hebrew so they could read the Bible.
Again, bummer.
Yeah. And if you like, I could start classes in Hebrew and then we'll go to Greek. How's that?
I would rather start with Greek because then your study in science and everything else is enhanced.
I I am not learning Twitter. I am not learning Instagram, and I am not learning Hebrew or Greek.
And then there's always Aramaic. We could start with Aramaic.
I think that's even
That's
harder.
But I think that's what Jesus was speaking in. How much of it was actually written, though, in the Aramaic, Jen? I don't know.
Okay, so let's go back to the other part of the message about being forgiven and forgiveness. And I thought of some things to ask, but I'm not asking for answers. So they're rhetorical questions. So a chance to think about that as we close out. Have you ever been depressed? Have you ever felt so bad about something that you were sure there was no way you could be forgiven? So again, I'm not looking for your answers. I'm looking for your thoughts to yourself or to you and your partner, or however you want to discuss it or think about it. But I think, and the conclusion I've come to, and that Adam was talking about, was God and his son, Jesus, will forgive us if we're truly sorry and truly repent. So I'd like to close with a prayer. And you're welcome to read along, say it along with me. Lord, help me to trust you in my darkest hours. Help me to remember that you can take something as ugly as a cross and then turn it into an instrument of salvation. Grant me the courage to keep walking when I feel like giving up. Amen. And that came out one of the books. I can't remember exactly where I got that, but it was out of one of the Adam Hamilton books. May have been the last part of that of this. I think it was the last part of this out of the way, actually. Yeah, the section that we used was in the way, and that wasn't where I found that. But anyway, what I plan to do now as a closeout is I'm going to play a couple more of Miriam's songs, and then I got a couple others that I found that I thought were particularly good. So those of you who want to stay on and listen to the music, and those who want to start exactly at 10 o'clock to hear Pastor Michael's sermon, you're welcome to quit and start at 10. But the nice thing about it not being live is we can start at 10:05, and no one's going to complain about us walking in late. Although Michael said he has a video camera at everybody's homes, and he is checking on whether you're starting on time. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We had 16 people, which is a goodly number. So thank you very much. And we'll next week we're going to finish up with. We've got 2 more weeks or 3 more weeks worth of Simon Peter. Actually, I can share that screen real quickly with you if I can find it. There we go. So here's our schedule. So we did our bonus week this week. Next week we're going to do chapter 6, the rest of the story. There's so much in that I've put it into 2 weeks. I will send out some reading material for some scriptures to read. There's a lot of discussion about what happened after the Galilee. So with Simon Peter, and then the last week will be the silent years. Depending on how these 2 weeks go, we may move June 28th into June 21st, but we'll see. Once we know for sure, we'll figure out when we want to start on Unafraid. I think the books are coming in sometime in this time frame between the 21st and the 28th. That was part of the reason for saying July 5th as a start time.
Thank you, Scott, for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yes,
Scott.
thank you, Scott.
We
For
appreciate all the
participating,
work
buddy.
you put into leading this.
I'm doing it, I do it out of
Thank
love.
you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Really enjoying it. And learning a lot as I do it. So I'm glad you all appreciate it, but frankly, I'm just doing it for myself.
Well, enough reason in itself.
Oh, let's see whether this will start up or not. That's what happens when you have to switch.
Still a good thing for the rest of this.
There we go. I want to.
Have a good week, everyone.
Thank you. You too.
You too. Good week.